My name is Francesca, and I am 26 years old. I have been lying in this hospital bed for 3 weeks now, staring at my phone, watching friends and coworkers send their love. But never a call from mom and dad. My little sister Alexandra has always been their golden child. I used to think physical pain was the worst kind, until the realization that my own parents would not visit me after my accident. Before I tell you how my parents finally showed up at my hospital bed when they needed something from me, let me know where you're watching from and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt invisible in your own family. I grew up in a comfortable middle-class suburban home outside of Boston. Our house was not extravagant, but it was certainly nice enough with 4 bedrooms and a spacious backyard where neighborhood kids would gather to play. My father worked as a senior manager at a financial firm, always wearing crisp suits and carrying a leather briefcase that seemed to weigh him down. My mother was an elementary school teacher, beloved by her students and respected by other parents in the community. Then there was Alexandra, my sister, who was 4 years younger than me. From the moment she was born, she became the center of our family universe. With her natural blonde curls and bright blue eyes, she was the picture-perfect daughter. While I was quiet and bookish, Alexandra was outgoing and charming, always the first to volunteer for school plays or community events. She had an undeniable talent for the arts, whether it was painting, dancing, or playing the piano, which my parents nurtured at every opportunity. I still remember the day my mother signed Alexandra up for ballet lessons when she was just 5 years old. I was 9 at the time and had been asking to join the science club at school for weeks. My request was met with, "We will see Francesca," but Alexandra got her pink tutu the very next day. This pattern continued throughout our childhood. Alexandra received piano lessons, art classes, and was even signed up with a children's modeling agency by the time she was 8. Meanwhile, I was told that if I wanted to pursue my interests in science and mathematics, I would need to find scholarships or work for them myself. It was not that my parents were cruel or abusive. They provided for my basic needs, ensured I had food, clothing, and a good education, but there was always a clear distinction in how they treated us. Alexandra received the warmest hugs, the most enthusiastic praise, and their undivided attention. I received polite acknowledgement for my achievements, but never the same level of excitement or pride. My 16th birthday is a particularly painful memory. I had been looking forward to a small celebration with my family, perhaps dinner at my favorite restaurant. Instead, my birthday was completely forgotten because it coincided with Alexandra's dance recital. My parents spent the entire day helping her prepare, driving her to the venue early for rehearsal, and beaming with pride as she performed. When I quietly mentioned at bedtime that it was my birthday, my mother gasped, covered her mouth, and said, "Oh, Francesca," with all the excitement, it completely slipped my mind. "We will celebrate this weekend, I promise." That weekend never came as Alexandra was invited to a special workshop with a visiting dance instructor, and my parents were consumed with that instead. I tried my best to build a relationship with my parents. I joined them for family dinners, helped with household chores without being asked, and even took an interest in Alexandra's activities, hoping to connect with them through her. But despite my efforts, there was always an emotional distance that I could not bridge. My mother would smile and pat my hand when I shared news about a good grade or a school achievement, but her eyes would light up only when Alexandra entered the room. My father would nod approvingly at my academic successes, but would leap to his feet with enthusiasm when Alexandra wanted to show him a new painting or play a piece on the piano. By my senior year of high school, I had convinced myself that I did not need my parents' validation or love. I focused on my studies, determined to win scholarships and escape to a college far from home. I told myself I was independent and strong, that I did not care about their obvious favoritism. But deep down, there was always that ache, that longing for a mother who would stroke my hair when I was sad, or a father who would look at me with the same pride he showed when he looked at Alexandra. I remember watching through my bedroom window as my father spent an entire Saturday teaching Alexandra how to drive patiently, guiding her, laughing at her mistakes, and celebrating her progress. When it had been my turn to learn 2 years earlier, he had hired a driving instructor, claiming he was too busy with work. These small differences, these little rejections, they built up over time, creating a wall between us that seemed impossible to scale. Despite this, I maintained a polite relationship with my parents. I called on birthdays and holidays, sent thoughtful cards, and visited during school breaks. I never confronted them about their favoritism, partly because I feared confirmation of what I already knew. They simply loved Alexandra more. And perhaps more painfully, I feared they would deny it, gaslight me into thinking it was all in my head, that I was being overly sensitive or jealous of my talented sister. Alexandra, to her credit, never deliberately lorded her position over me. She was kind in her own way, often sharing her spotlight with me when our parents were watching. "Francesca helped me with this painting," she would say, or "Francesca taught me this science trick." But her attempts, while appreciated, could not undo the years of unbalanced affection from our parents. By the time I graduated high school, I had accepted my place in the family hierarchy. I was the responsible, independent daughter who would make her own way in the world. Alexandra was the cherished one, the one whose dreams would be funded and supported, whose accomplishments would be celebrated with far more enthusiasm than mine ever would be. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but I had no choice but to accept it and move forward with my life carrying that weight of unequal love. After graduating with honors in software engineering, I seized an opportunity at a tech company in Seattle. The job offer came with a competitive salary and excellent benefits. But what appealed to me most was the 3,000-mile distance between Seattle and my family home in Boston. The physical separation felt like a chance to breathe, to define myself without the constant comparison to Alexandra. My first apartment in Seattle was a small studio downtown, barely 600 square feet, but it was mine. I furnished it with secondhand finds and discount store purchases, turning it into a cozy space that reflected my personality. For the first time, I did not have to consider anyone's taste but my own. No more compromising on the color of my bedroom walls or where to place my books. Every decision, from the blue throw pillows on my sofa to the astronomy prints on my walls, was entirely mine. At work, I quickly established myself as a dedicated and innovative employee. Unlike at home, where my accomplishments were overshadowed, my colleagues and supervisors recognized my talents. Within 6 months, I was assigned to a high-priority project developing security software for financial institutions. My team leader, Margaret, became a mentor, pushing me to develop my skills and take credit for my ideas. "You have a brilliant mind, Francesca," she told me during my first performance review, "but you need to learn to speak up more, to own your brilliance." Those words struck a chord. I had spent so many years being quiet, trying not to take up too much space in my family, that I had carried that habit into my professional life. With Margaret's encouragement, I began to assert myself more in meetings, to pitch my ideas confidently, and to take on challenging aspects of projects. The positive feedback was immediate and reinforcing. Within 2 years, I received my first promotion to senior software engineer. The salary increase allowed me to move to a larger apartment in a nicer neighborhood. I still remember the day I signed the lease on my new place, a 1-bedroom with a small office space and a balcony overlooking a park. Standing in the empty living room, I felt a surge of pride. This was tangible proof of my success, my independence, my value outside the shadow of my family. During this time, I also developed a circle of close friends who became the support system I had always craved. There was Lily, a graphic designer I met at a local coffee shop; David, another software engineer who joined my company a few months after I did; and Sophia, my neighbor, who worked as a nurse at a nearby hospital. We gathered for weekly dinner parties, weekend hikes in the mountains surrounding Seattle, and movie nights where we would dissect films until the early hours of the morning. With them, I did not have to earn affection or compete for attention. I was valued simply for being myself. They listened when I spoke, remembered my birthday, and celebrated my successes with genuine enthusiasm. They became the family I chose, filling the emotional void left by the one I was born into. Then Justin entered my life. We met at a tech conference where he was presenting on ethical considerations in artificial intelligence. His intelligence was matched by his kindness, and I found myself drawn to both. Our first date was at a small bookstore cafe, where we talked for hours about everything from quantum computing to our favorite science fiction novels. With Justin, I never felt judged or found wanting. He loved me without conditions or comparisons, a concept so foreign to my experience that it took me months to fully trust it. Despite building this new life 3,000 miles away from my parents, I still made efforts to maintain contact. I called home once a week, usually on Sunday evenings. The conversations were predictable, polite inquiries about my job and apartment, followed by detailed updates about Alexandra. She was in her final year at Juilliard, or she had been selected for a prestigious art exhibition, or she was dating the son of a family friend who was studying medicine. My mother's voice would grow animated when discussing Alexandra, a stark contrast to the measured tones she used when asking about my life. I sent thoughtful gifts for birthdays and holidays, items chosen specifically to match my parents' interests. My father received books on financial history. My mother got artisanal teas and handmade jewelry. Their thank you calls were brief and perfunctory. When I visited during holidays, I found myself slipping back into old patterns, becoming quieter, less visible, as Alexandra commanded the spotlight with stories of her artistic endeavors and social connections. The disparity in our treatment became even more apparent when I received a significant promotion to project manager, leading a team developing accessibility software. I called home with the news barely containing my excitement. My mother said, "That's nice, dear," before immediately launching into the announcement that Alexandra was engaged to her boyfriend Thomas, who had just finished medical school. The next 30 minutes were dedicated to wedding plans and how perfect Thomas was for Alexandra. My promotion was never mentioned again. Still, I persisted in maintaining the relationship, sending cards, making calls, visiting when possible. I told myself it was the mature thing to do, that family was important regardless of the imbalances. I convinced myself that one day they would see me, really see me, and appreciate the woman I had become. Looking back, I recognize this as the desperate hope of a child still seeking parental approval, even as an adult who had built a successful life on her own terms. The day that changed everything was deceptively ordinary. Seattle was experiencing one of its typical rainy days in late October. I had stayed late at the office finalizing a presentation for an important client meeting the following morning. By the time I left, it was past 9 p.m., and the rain had intensified into a downpour. I remember the weight of exhaustion as I walked to my car in the parking garage, thinking about the hot shower and comfortable bed waiting for me at home. Justin had texted earlier, saying he would be at my place when I got home, probably with takeout from our favorite Thai restaurant. That small kindness, that thoughtfulness made me smile as I started my car and pulled out onto the rain-slicked streets. The traffic was light given the hour, and I drove carefully, mindful of the poor visibility. I was less than 2 miles from my apartment, waiting at a red light when it happened. Later witnesses would tell police that a delivery truck coming from the opposite direction had hydroplaned on the wet road, lost control, and crashed through the intersection directly into the driver's side of my car. I have only fragments of memory from the impact. The blinding headlights, the deafening crunch of metal, the strange sensation of my car spinning, the airbag deploying with shocking force. Then nothing. Blackness. I regained consciousness in the hospital, surrounded by beeping machines and the antiseptic smell that seems universal to all medical facilities. The pain was immediate and overwhelming, radiating from seemingly every part of my body. I tried to move and found I could not. Panic set in until a nurse noticed I was awake and rushed to my side. "Try not to move, honey," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "You're in the hospital. You've been in an accident, but you're safe now." The next few hours were a blur of doctors' tests and increasing awareness of the extent of my injuries. My left leg was broken in 3 places, requiring surgical insertion of metal rods and screws. 4 ribs were fractured. I had internal bleeding that had required emergency surgery. My pelvis was cracked. My left arm was broken. My face had been lacerated by glass, requiring dozens of stitches. When Justin was finally allowed to see me, his face was ashen with worry. He had been called as my emergency contact and had been waiting in the hospital for hours. He took my right hand, the only part of me that seemed relatively uninjured, and held it as if it were the most precious thing in the world. "I thought I had lost you," he whispered, his voice breaking. "When the hospital called, I thought—" He could not finish the sentence, but he did not need to. I understood. Over the next few days, as I drifted in and out of consciousness due to pain medication, Justin remained a constant presence. He spoke with doctors, managed communications with my workplace, and coordinated with my friends who were desperate for updates. Lily brought flowers and sat reading to me when I was awake enough to listen. David set up a meal delivery service for Justin so he would not have to leave the hospital for food. Sophia, with her medical knowledge, helped translate the doctor's complex explanations into terms we could better understand. It was on the third day, when I was more lucid, that I asked Justin if my parents had been notified. His expression changed, a flicker of something unpleasant crossing his face before he controlled it. "Yes," he said carefully. "I called them the morning after your accident. They know how serious it is." "Are they coming?" I asked, already knowing the answer from his expression. Justin hesitated. "They said they would try to arrange something, but your father's in the middle of a big project at work and your mother mentioned something about an important recital for Alexandra." The pain that shot through me then had nothing to do with my physical injuries. It was a different kind of pain, one I was familiar with but had never felt quite so acutely. I nodded, turning my face away so Justin would not see the tears that threatened to spill. Later that day, I managed to call my parents myself. My fingers clumsy on the phone Justin held for me. My mother answered, her voice bright until I identified myself. "Oh, Francesca," she said, her tone immediately shifting to one of concern that did not quite ring true. "How are you feeling, sweetheart? Justin told us about your accident. It's just terrible. The doctors say I'm lucky to be alive," I said, my voice weak. "They say my recovery will take months, maybe longer. I might need more surgeries." "Oh my mother replied. "That does sound serious. We would come out there, of course, but your father simply cannot get away right now. His team is in the middle of a merger that requires his constant attention, and Alexandra has her first solo exhibition opening this weekend. We simply must be there for her big moment." I swallowed hard. "I understand," I said, though I did not. How could I understand parents who would not drop everything to be with their critically injured daughter? "We will try to visit as soon as things settle down," my mother continued. "Perhaps in a few weeks, and of course if you need anything, just let us know." The conversation ended soon after, with vague promises to call again soon to check on my progress. When I hung up, Justin took the phone, his expression tight with anger he was trying to contain for my sake. "They are not coming," I said flatly. "No," he confirmed, squeezing my hand. "But Francesca, you are not alone. Not for a second. Do you understand? I am here. Lily, David, Sophia. Everyone at work. We are all here for you." In that moment, lying broken in a hospital bed 3,000 miles from my family, I finally accepted the truth I had been avoiding for years. My parents did not love me the way parents should love their child. It was not that they loved Alexandra more. It was that they barely loved me at all. The realization was both devastating and strangely freeing. I no longer needed to earn their love or approval. I could stop trying. I could focus instead on the people who had shown up, who were showing up every day, proving their love through their presence and support. The following weeks were a grueling cycle of surgeries, pain, and the slow beginning of what would be a long recovery process. The doctors were honest about my prognosis. While they expected me to recover, they were unsure if I would ever walk normally again. My left leg had been so severely damaged that even with the best surgical intervention, there would likely be permanent limitations to my mobility. Throughout it all, no family member appeared at my bedside. No flowers arrived from them, no cards, not even a text message asking how I was doing. Meanwhile, my apartment filled with gifts and cards from colleagues I'd barely interacted with. My inbox overflowed with well wishes from acquaintances from college and even high school. Everyone, it seemed, cared more about my recovery than the people who had brought me into this world. The first 3 months after the accident were the hardest of my life. I remained hospitalized for 6 weeks, undergoing 3 additional surgeries to repair the damage to my leg. Each operation brought its own cycle of pain medication that left me foggy and nauseated, and the slow, incremental return to consciousness and clarity. Justin arranged to work remotely so he could be with me as much as possible. He would set up his laptop in my hospital room, typing with one hand while holding mine with the other. At night, despite the nurses' protests, he would stay until I fell asleep, and he was always there when I woke in the morning. His unwavering presence became my anchor in the storm of pain and uncertainty. My friends created a rotation schedule to ensure someone was always with me when Justin needed to go home to shower or attend unavoidable meetings. Lily would bring her sketchbook and draw while telling me stories about her latest design projects. David would read aloud from science fiction novels, doing different voices for each character that made me laugh despite the pain. Sophia used her nursing connections to ensure I got extra attention from the hospital staff and explained medical procedures in ways that made them less frightening. But the hardest part was not the physical pain or the boredom of hospital confinement. It was the physical therapy that began once the surgeons declared my bones stable enough for movement. I still remember my first session, the seemingly impossible task of simply lifting my leg an inch off the bed. The physical therapist, a kind but firm woman named Rachel, would not accept my tears or protests. "I know it hurts," she would say, her hands gently supporting my damaged limb. "But the alternative is worse. You have to move to heal." There were days when I did not want to continue, days when the pain was so overwhelming that the effort seemed pointless. What was I fighting for? A body that would never be the same. A life forever altered. On those days, it was Justin who would sit beside me, his eyes level with mine. "You are the strongest person I know," he would tell me. "And it's okay if you don't feel strong right now. Borrow my strength until yours returns." After 6 weeks, I was released from the hospital, but my recovery was far from complete. I moved back to my apartment, now modified with ramps for the wheelchair I would need for at least another month. The shower had been fitted with a seat and handrails. My bedroom had been rearranged to accommodate my limited mobility. These changes, these accommodations to my new reality, were all organized and funded by Justin and my friends. Learning to use crutches was its own special kind of hell. My broken arm had healed enough to bear some weight, but the coordination required to move with crutches while keeping weight off my still healing leg was frustratingly difficult. I would practice for hours, making painfully slow circuits of my apartment, determined to regain my independence. The walker came next, less dignified, but more stable. I hated how it made me feel elderly and infirm, but I could not deny its utility. With the walker, I could finally move around my apartment without Justin's constant support, could make myself a cup of tea or get a book from the shelf. These small victories became the milestones by which I measured my progress. Throughout this time, I was on extended medical leave from my job. The company had been supportive, assuring me that my position would be waiting when I was ready to return. My team sent regular updates, consulting me on key decisions even as I recovered. Their inclusion made me feel valued and connected to the world beyond my apartment walls. What was conspicuously absent was any communication from my family. After that initial phone call from the hospital, I had sent weekly email updates to my parents, detailing my surgeries, my progress, my struggles. The responses when they came were brief and impersonal. "Glad to hear you're improving," my father wrote once. "Take care of yourself," from my mother. No questions about what they could do to help, no offers to visit, no real engagement with the life-altering experience I was going through. One day, scrolling through social media during a particularly low moment, I came across photos posted by my mother. She and my father were at a beach resort, their faces tanned and smiling. Alexandra was with them, posing in a sun hat by a swimming pool. The caption read, "Much-needed family vacation with our amazing daughter before her big gallery opening." I stared at the images for a long time, taking in the evidence of their carefree enjoyment, while I struggled through the most challenging period of my life. They had found time for a vacation with Alexandra, but not even a weekend to visit their critically injured older daughter. The message could not have been clearer if they had written it in neon lights. I was not really part of their family, not in the ways that mattered. That night, I cried until I had no tears left, mourning not just for the family I did not have, but for the years I had spent trying to earn their love. Justin held me through it, his shirt damp with my tears, his hands steady on my back. When I finally quieted, exhausted by grief, he helped me to bed and sat beside me until I fell asleep. The next morning, I made a decision. I would no longer send updates to my parents. I would no longer check their social media or seek any connection with them. I would stop hoping for what they were clearly incapable of giving me. Instead, I would focus entirely on my recovery and on nurturing the relationships with people who had proven their love through their actions, not just their biology. This decision, painful as it was, brought an unexpected sense of peace. The energy I had been expending on seeking parental approval could now be directed toward healing both physically and emotionally. I threw myself into physical therapy with renewed determination, pushing through pain because I was doing it for myself, not to prove my worth to anyone else. By the end of 3 months, I had graduated from the walker to a cane. My steps were slow and often painful, but they were steps nonetheless. I could manage short walks outside my apartment, could join my friends for brief outings to nearby cafes. These small expansions of my world felt like enormous victories after the confinement of the hospital and early recovery. Throughout this period, Justin never wavered. He celebrated each milestone, no matter how small, with genuine enthusiasm. He adapted his life to accommodate my limitations without complaint or resentment. In him, I found what family should be: unwavering support, unconditional love, presence in the hardest moments. The contrast with my biological family could not have been more stark. 6 months after the accident, my doctors declared me ready to return to work on a part-time remote basis. My physical recovery was progressing well, though I still needed a cane for anything more than short distances and experienced chronic pain that required management. The facial lacerations had healed into faint, silvery scars, barely noticeable unless you knew to look for them. Externally, I was beginning to resemble my pre-accident self, though I knew I was fundamentally changed in ways that were not visible. My return to work was met with warmth and enthusiasm from colleagues who had been checking in throughout my recovery. Margaret, my mentor, had organized a schedule that allowed me to ease back in, gradually working 4 hours a day from home initially, with the flexibility to increase as my stamina improved. The first video conference with my team left me emotional, as they had decorated their conference room with welcome back signs and took turns expressing how much they had missed my input. Being engaged with work again gave me purpose beyond recovery. I found myself thinking about projects in the shower, jotting down ideas before bed, feeling the familiar spark of creativity that had always driven my career. But my perspective had shifted. Before the accident, I had been focused on advancement, on proving myself through achievement. Now I wanted my work to have meaning, to help others in tangible ways. This new outlook led me to propose a project that would become the centerpiece of my professional rebirth. Drawing on my own experience as someone with temporary disability, I suggested developing software specifically designed to improve accessibility for users with physical limitations. The concept was to create adaptive interfaces that could be customized to individual needs, making technology more inclusive. My pitch to the executive team was personal and passionate. I spoke openly about how my accident had opened my eyes to the challenges faced by people with disabilities, how even simple tasks on a smartphone or computer could become frustratingly difficult. I described the gap in the market for truly user-friendly adaptive technology and how our company was perfectly positioned to fill it. The response was immediate and enthusiastic. Not only was my project approved, but I was promoted to lead the new accessibility division, a role that came with a significant salary increase and the authority to build my own team. This vote of confidence, this recognition of both my technical skills and lived experience, was profoundly validating. As I built my team and developed the project roadmap, I found myself working with a sense of purpose I had never experienced before. We conducted user research with disability advocacy groups, held focus sessions with people with various physical limitations, and iterated our designs based on real-world feedback. The work was challenging but deeply satisfying, knowing that what we were creating would make a genuine difference in people's lives. During this period of professional renaissance, my personal life was also evolving in beautiful ways. Justin, who had been my rock throughout the darkest days of my recovery, asked me to move in with him. His apartment was in a modern building with elevator access and wide doorways, more accommodating to my ongoing mobility challenges than my own place. The process of combining our lives of creating a shared home was healing in ways I had not anticipated. Justin approached the task with thoughtfulness, ensuring that everything was arranged for my comfort and independence. He installed grab bars in the bathroom, lowered shelves in the kitchen so I could reach them easily, and bought a specially designed mattress that provided better support for my still healing body. These practical adjustments were expressions of love as meaningful as any romantic gesture. One evening, as we sat on our balcony watching the sunset over the Seattle skyline, Justin got down on one knee beside my chair. The ring he offered was simple and elegant, a sapphire surrounded by small diamonds. "You are the strongest, most beautiful soul I have ever known," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "Will you marry me, Francesca?" I said yes through tears of joy, overwhelmed by the certainty that this was what love should feel like, this steady presence, this unwavering support, this acceptance of all that I was. We decided on a long engagement, giving me time to continue healing before planning a wedding. But the commitment itself was a powerful statement of our shared future. As my personal and professional life flourished, I maintained the boundary I had set with my family. I sent no updates, made no calls, sought no connection. The absence of their presence in my life, which had once been a throbbing wound, gradually dulled to an occasional ache like an old injury that flares up in bad weather. There were still moments, birthdays and holidays, especially when their absence felt acute. But these were balanced by the richness of the connections I had built, the chosen family that surrounded me with genuine care. My accessibility project launched to considerable acclaim within the industry. Tech publications wrote about our innovative approach, disability advocacy groups praised our inclusive design philosophy, and users responded with overwhelmingly positive feedback. 6 months after the initial launch, I was invited to speak at a major technology conference about inclusive design principles. Standing on that stage, still leaning slightly on my cane, but standing nonetheless, I felt a profound sense of transformation. The accident that had nearly killed me had also catalyzed a metamorphosis, pushing me to redirect my talents toward work that mattered, to recognize the genuine love in my life, to stop pursuing the approval of those who were incapable of giving it. I spoke about this openly in my presentation, sharing how personal adversity had shaped my professional mission. After my talk, I was approached by a representative from a prestigious technology magazine who wanted to profile me and my team for a feature on innovation in accessibility technology. The article, when published, included not just details about our software, but my personal journey as well. There was a photo of me with my team, another of Justin and me in our apartment, and a third of me working with a user testing group. The headline read, "Rising from Tragedy: How Francesca's Near-Death Experience is Revolutionizing Accessibility Tech." I sent no copy of the article to my parents. I no longer needed their recognition or approval. The validation that mattered came from users whose lives were improved by our work, from colleagues who respected my leadership, from friends who celebrated every milestone, from the man who loved me completely. For the first time in my life, I felt wholly seen and valued, not for who I was in relation to someone else, but simply for being myself. 1 year and 2 months after the accident, on a crisp winter Saturday, the doorbell rang. Justin and I were in the kitchen preparing lunch together, a domestic routine that had become one of my favorite parts of our life together. I was chopping vegetables, a task that had once been impossible during my early recovery, but was now manageable, though I still moved more slowly than before. "I'll get it," Justin said, setting down the bread he was slicing. "Probably that package we are expecting." I continued chopping, listening absently to the sound of the door opening, then the murmur of voices. Something in Justin's tone, a sudden tension, caught my attention. I set down my knife and moved toward the entrance hall, curious about what was happening. The sight that met me froze me in place. Standing in our doorway were my parents, looking older and more tired than I remembered them. My mother had lost weight, her face drawn, the skin under her eyes darkened with fatigue. My father, always so immaculately presented, seemed rumpled, his shirt collar slightly askew, his hair not as neatly combed as usual. For a moment, we all simply stared at each other. A year of silence stretched between us, filled with unspoken recriminations and pain. I leaned more heavily on my cane, suddenly feeling the ache in my leg more acutely. "Francesca," my mother finally said, her voice breaking slightly on my name. "You look well." The banality of this greeting after everything that had happened almost made me laugh. I did not feel well. I felt shocked, confused, and immediately defensive, as if my hard-won peace was under threat. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. "Can we come in?" my father asked, glancing at Justin, whose body language made it clear he was not inclined to welcome them. "We need to talk to you. It's important." I looked at Justin, who raised his eyebrows slightly, deferring to my decision. After a moment's hesitation, I nodded. "Come into the living room," I said, turning without waiting to see if they followed. I settled into the armchair that had become my usual spot, the one adjusted to provide the best support for my still recovering body. Justin sat on the arm, a physical reminder of his presence and support. My parents took the sofa across from us, perched awkwardly on the edge as if uncertain of their welcome. "You look different," my father said, his eyes taking in the changes in me, the subtle scars on my face, the cane leaning against my chair, the way I held my body slightly protectively. "A near-fatal car accident will do that to a person," I replied, unable to keep the edge from my voice. "Francesca," my mother began, her hands twisting nervously in her lap, "we know we have not been. We should have been here for you after your accident. We know that now." "Now?" I repeated, incredulous. "It's been over a year. I nearly died. I spent months learning to walk again. Where were you then?" "We made a terrible mistake," my father said, his voice uncharacteristically humble. "We have no excuse that could possibly justify our absence, but we are here now because we need your help. Alexandra is very ill." The abrupt pivot from what had sounded like the beginning of an apology to the real reason for their visit hit me like a physical blow. Of course, they had not come because they had finally realized their neglect of me. They had come because they needed something. The familiar pattern reasserted itself, but this time I was not the same daughter who had always accepted my place in the family hierarchy. "What's wrong with Alexandra?" I asked, my tone neutral, giving nothing away. "She has been diagnosed with chronic kidney disease." My mother explained, her eyes filling with tears. "Her kidney function has been declining for months. The doctors say she needs a transplant." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, meaning it. Despite everything, I did not wish ill on my sister. "I assume you are both being tested as potential donors." My father nodded. "We have been. Neither of us is a match. Extended family members have also been tested. No matches so far." "So you have come to see if I might be a compatible donor." I concluded, the pieces falling into place with crystal clarity. "Yes," my mother admitted. "The doctors say siblings often have the best chance of compatibility. Francesca, I know we have no right to ask this of you." "No, you don't." I interrupted, anger rising in me like a tide. "You have no right to appear at my door after abandoning me through the worst experience of my life, after not even bothering to call or send a card and ask me to undergo major surgery for you." "Not for us," my father corrected quickly. "For Alexandra. She is your sister." "And I am your daughter," I countered, my voice rising despite my efforts to control it. "I was in a hospital bed for weeks, underwent multiple surgeries, spent months learning to walk again, and you could not be bothered to visit once. Not once." "We should have been there," my mother acknowledged, tears now spilling down her cheeks. "We were wrong, so wrong. But Francesca, please don't punish Alexandra for our failures." The manipulation in that statement, the implication that my hesitation was about punishing my sister rather than a reasonable response to their treatment of me, ignited a fury I had not known I was capable of feeling. "This is not about punishment," I said, my voice shaking. "This is about the fact that you only acknowledge my existence when you need something from me. Do you have any idea what the past year has been like for me? Do you even care?" "Of course we care," my father insisted, though his discomfort was evident. "We have always cared about you, Francesca." Really? I challenged. Then why, when Justin called to tell you I might not survive the night after my accident, did you decide that Alexandra's recital was more important? Why, when I sent you weekly updates about my recovery, did you respond with one line, emails if at all? Why did you go on a family vacation while I was learning to walk again? My parents exchanged uncomfortable glances, clearly unprepared for the directness of my questions or the depth of my anger. We made mistakes, my father admitted. Terrible mistakes that we can't undo. But we are here now asking for your help, not just as our daughter, but as Alexandra's sister. Did you know? I continued, ignoring his plea, that my friends created a rotation schedule to ensure someone was always with me in the hospital, that my colleagues sent meals and cards and flowers, that strangers from internet support groups wrote to encourage me when they heard about my story. Everyone, it seems, could find time and compassion for me except my own parents. My mother was openly crying now, her shoulders shaking. We didn't know how serious it was, she offered weakly. Justin said you were stable and we thought. You knew exactly how serious it was, Justin interjected, speaking for the first time since we had sat down. His voice was controlled but tight with anger. I told you she had multiple broken bones, internal bleeding, that the doctors were not certain if she would walk normally again. I told you every detail and you still chose not to come. A heavy silence fell over the room. Outside, the sounds of normal Saturday life continued, children playing in the park across the street, cars, passing a neighbor's dog barking. The contrast between that ordinary backdrop and the emotional intensity in our living room felt surreal. How did you even find out where I live? I asked finally. We moved after I left the hospital. My mother pulled a magazine from her bag, the technology publication that had featured me and my accessibility project. We saw this, she said, passing it to me. Someone from your father's office brought it to his attention. We had no idea you had become so successful. We are proud of you, Francesca. The words I had longed to hear for most of my life now rang hollow, coming only after I had been publicly recognized, only when they needed something from me. I handed the magazine back without comment. Will you at least think about being tested? My father asked. Alexandra is getting worse. The doctors say time is becoming critical. And before I could respond, Justin stood up abruptly. I think you should leave now, he said, his protective instinct clearly overriding politeness. Francesca has heard your request. She will make her own decision in her own time without pressure from you. But we have only just arrived, my mother protested. We came all this way. After more than a year of silence, Justin reminded her, his tone leaving no room for argument. You have said what you came to say. Now Francesca needs space to process this. My parents looked to me, clearly hoping I would countermand Justin's suggestion. But I was emotionally exhausted, the unexpected confrontation having drained what energy I had. Justin is right, I said. I need time to think. I will let you know my decision. Reluctantly, they stood. My father reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. My cell phone number is on here, he said, placing it on the coffee table. Please call us whatever you decide. They moved toward the door, hesitating as if hoping for some last-minute softening on my part. But I remained in my chair watching them go, with a mixture of anger and a deep, aching sadness for what might have been for the parents they could have been, but chose not to be. After Justin closed the door behind them, he returned to the living room and knelt beside my chair, taking my hands in his. Are you okay? He asked, his eyes searching mine. I wasn't sure how to answer that question. I was angry, hurt, confused, overwhelmed. But underneath all of that was a strange sense of closure. Seeing them again, confronting the reality of their neglect, rather than the idealized version I had sometimes let myself believe in during moments of weakness, was clarifying. I'm not okay right now, I admitted. But I will be. Justin nodded, understanding as always. Whatever you decide about the testing, I'm with you. But Francesca, please make this decision for yourself, not for them, not even for Alexandra. You have given enough to a family that has given very little in return. His words struck a chord, articulating the conflict I was already feeling. Did I owe Alexandra my help regardless of our parents' behavior? Was my hesitation a form of petty revenge or a legitimate act of self-protection? These were questions I would need time to answer. The days following my parents' unexpected visit were filled with intense self-reflection and emotional turmoil. I found myself reviewing our interaction over and over, replaying their words, their expressions, the way they had pivoted so quickly from acknowledgement of their failure to their request for my help. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became that they had not come seeking reconciliation or to make amends, but simply because they needed something only I might be able to provide. Justin, true to his word, did not try to influence my decision one way or another. He listened as I processed my thoughts aloud, offered comfort when memories brought fresh pain, and assured me repeatedly that whatever I chose, he would support me fully. This is not a decision about being a good person or a bad person, he reminded me one evening as we sat on our balcony watching the city lights come on as dusk settled over Seattle. This is about what you can genuinely offer without causing harm to yourself. My friends, when I shared the situation with them, were unanimously protective of me. Lily, always the most outspoken, was vehement. "They have some nerve," she fumed during our weekly dinner gathering, "showing up after all this time like nothing happened, expecting you to undergo major surgery for them." "For Alexandra," I corrected quietly. "Not for them." "Still," David interjected, "it's a big ask from people who couldn't be bothered to visit when you were the one in crisis." Sophia, with her medical background, offered a more practical perspective. "Being tested doesn't commit you to donating," she pointed out. "You could get the information first, see if you're even compatible, and then make a decision." It was sound advice, and after a week of deliberation, I decided to be tested. Not because I felt obligated to my parents, but because I recognized that Alexandra, despite our complicated relationship, was not responsible for our parents' behavior. She had been the favorite child, yes, but she had never deliberately caused me harm or excluded me. In many ways, she had been as much a product of our parents' dynamics as I had been shaped by their expectations and preferences in ways neither of us had controlled. I called my father, the conversation brief and businesslike. I would be tested, I told him, but I was making no commitments beyond that. He expressed gratitude that seemed genuine, though cautious, clearly aware that he was on thin ice with me. The testing process was straightforward but comprehensive. Blood work, tissue typing, medical history review, and psychological evaluation, all to determine not just compatibility, but my suitability as a donor. Throughout the process, I maintained emotional distance from the outcome, focusing on one step at a time, rather than projecting forward to what might be asked of me. 2 weeks after the initial tests, the nephrologist called with the results. I was not a suitable donor. The damage to my internal organs from the car accident, though mostly healed, had left my kidney function slightly compromised. While I was healthy enough for normal life, donating a kidney would put me at unacceptable risk for future complications. The news brought a complex mixture of emotions. Relief, certainly, at being spared a difficult decision, but also a surprising sense of disappointment, as if I had been denied the opportunity to prove something, though I wasn't sure what or to whom. I called my father with the news, explaining the medical reasoning behind the determination. His disappointment was palpable, but to his credit, he did not try to make me feel guilty. "Thank you for trying, Francesca," he said. "It means more than you know that you were willing to be tested." After that call, I found myself thinking about Alexandra, wondering how she was coping with her illness, what she knew about our parents' absence from my life after my accident. On impulse, I decided to visit her at the hospital where she was receiving dialysis. I did not inform my parents of this decision, wanting to see my sister without their mediating presence. The hospital was in Boston, which meant a cross-country flight. Justin offered to come with me, but I felt this was something I needed to do alone. The journey was physically taxing my still healing body, protesting the long hours in a confined airplane seat, but I was driven by a need for closure, for answers, for some kind of resolution to this chapter of my life. I found Alexandra in a private room, looking pale and much thinner than I remembered. Her once vibrant blonde hair seemed dulled, her blue eyes shadowed with fatigue. She was reading when I entered, and the shock on her face when she saw me was unmistakable. "Francesca," she whispered, as if not quite believing I was real. "Is that really you?" "It's me," I confirmed, moving to sit in the chair beside her bed. Up close I could see how ill she truly was, the yellowish tint to her skin, the brittle quality of her hair, the way her hospital gown hung loosely on her diminished frame. "Mom and Dad said you were being tested," she said, setting aside her book. "I didn't think I'd actually see you. It's been so long." There was no accusation in her tone, just a quiet acknowledgement of the time that had passed since we had last been face to face. I studied her, searching for signs of the childhood favoritism in her expression, some indication that she had been complicit in our parents' unequal treatment. But all I saw was my sick sister, vulnerable and clearly frightened despite her attempt at composure. "I was tested," I confirmed, "but I'm not a suitable donor because of my car accident last year." Alexandra frowned, confusion crossing her face. "Car accident? What car accident?" The question hit me like a physical blow. "You don't know about my accident?" I asked, disbelief coloring my voice. She shook her head, her frown deepening. "No, what happened? Were you hurt?" I stared at her, processing the implications of her ignorance. My parents had not told her. They had hidden my trauma from her, perhaps to avoid uncomfortable questions about why they had not gone to be with me, perhaps to maintain the family narrative that had always centered around her. Slowly, carefully, I told her about the accident, the extent of my injuries, the long and painful recovery. I did not explicitly mention our parents' absence, but as I described the months of surgeries and rehabilitation, the question hung unspoken between us. "Why didn't Mom and Dad tell me?" Alexandra asked when I finished, her voice small and bewildered. "Why didn't they go to you? I don't understand." The genuine confusion in her eyes told me everything I needed to know. She had not been aware of the extent of our parents' favoritism, had not realized how completely I had been sidelined in their affections and priorities. The revelation seemed to shake her, calling into question her understanding of our family dynamic. "They had their reasons, I suppose," I said, unwilling to burden her with the full truth while she was already dealing with her own health crisis. "It's in the past now." But Alexandra, despite her illness, was not easily deflected. "No," she insisted, reaching out to take my hand. "Something is wrong here, Francesca. They should have been with you. They should have told me. All these years I thought we were just living separate lives because you chose to move away. I had no idea." Her voice broke, tears filling her eyes. I found myself in the unexpected position of comforting her, reassuring her that I was okay now that I had healed, that I had built a good life for myself in Seattle. "But we are sisters," she said, gripping my hand tightly. "We should have been there for each other. I should have known about your accident, should have come to you." Her distress was genuine, her remorse for a situation she had not created, but had unwittingly benefited from, clearly painful. In that moment, I saw her not as the golden child who had eclipsed me, but as another victim of our parents' dysfunctional approach to family, albeit in a very different way. We talked for hours, Alexandra asking questions about my life, my work, my recovery. I showed her pictures of Justin, told her about our engagement, about the accessibility software I had developed. She shared her struggles with her illness, her fear of the uncertainty ahead, her gratitude for my willingness to be tested despite our estrangement. As visiting hours drew to a close, Alexandra asked the question I had been expecting. "Will you come back before you return to Seattle? I'd like to know my sister again, if you're willing." I hesitated, weighing the potential pain against the possibility of healing. "Yes," I decided. "I'll come back tomorrow." The next 2 days were spent mostly at Alexandra's bedside. Our parents appeared briefly during one visit, clearly shocked to find me there. The atmosphere was tense, the weight of unspoken truths heavy in the air. But Alexandra, now aware that something was fundamentally wrong, insisted on talking openly. "Why didn't you tell me about Francesca's accident?" she demanded of our parents, her voice stronger than it had been in days. "Why didn't you go to her?" My father looked away, unable to meet her questioning gaze. My mother made excuses about distance, about commitments that could not be broken, about thinking the situation was not as serious as it turned out to be. But under Alexandra's persistent questioning, the truth began to emerge. They had prioritized her as they always had, assuming Francesca capable and independent. Francesca would manage on her own, as she always had. The conversation was painful but cathartic, bringing into the open the dynamics that had shaped our family for decades. No neat resolution was reached, no perfect reconciliation achieved. But something shifted, a crack in the facade that had allowed us all to pretend our family was functional when it was anything but. Before I left to return to Seattle, Alexandra and I exchanged contact information, promising to stay in touch regardless of what happened with our parents. She would continue dialysis while waiting for a compatible donor, a difficult road ahead, but not without hope. Back in Seattle, I found myself drawn to a support group for people estranged from their families. Sitting in a circle of strangers who understood the unique pain of familial rejection, I began to process the complex emotions of the past weeks, the past years. I shared my story, listened to others, and gradually began to find a kind of peace I had not thought possible. Justin and I set a date for our wedding, a small ceremony with the friends who had become our chosen family. We decided not to invite my parents, a decision that brought sadness, but also a sense of authenticity. Our celebration would include only people who had consistently shown us love and support, who had earned their place in our lives through their actions, rather than blood ties. In the months that followed, Alexandra and I maintained regular contact through calls and emails. Our relationship freed from the distorting lens of our parents. Favoritism began to develop into something new and genuine. She found a compatible donor through the National Registry and underwent a successful transplant, her recovery slow but steady. My own physical healing continued, the chronic pain gradually lessening my mobility, improving beyond what the doctors had initially predicted. I still used a cane for long walks or by the end of tiring days, but I had adapted to my new normal, finding ways to remain active and engaged despite the limitations imposed by the accident. The accessibility software I had developed expanded into a full suite of products, earning industry recognition and, more importantly, positive feedback from users whose lives were made easier by our innovation. I started a foundation to provide support for accident survivors who lacked family support, a way of transforming my painful experience into something that could help others. My relationship with my parents remained distant, occasional phone calls and email exchanges that were civil, but lacked real connection. I had accepted that they were unlikely to change in fundamental ways, that their capacity for love had always been conditional and limited. This acceptance, painful as it was, allowed me to stop hoping for what they could not give and to appreciate fully the genuine love that surrounded me. Looking back on the journey from that hospital bed after the accident to where I am now, I can see how adversity revealed the truth about my relationship, stripping away pretense and forcing me to confront reality. The people who truly loved me showed it through their presence in my darkest hours. Those who did not revealed themselves through their absence. Sometimes the family you create gives you more love than the family you were born into, and that realization doesn't just heal your wounds, it gives you wings to soar beyond what you ever thought possible. If you have ever felt like the invisible child or the unworthy one in your family, know that your value is not determined by those who failed to see it. Have you ever had to create your own family of choice when your biological family let you down? Share your experience in the comments, and remember to like and subscribe if this story resonated with you. Thank you for listening to my journey, and may you find the love and belonging you deserve, whether through blood ties or the connections you choose to nurture.